All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bloomerang Academy. We are so glad you're joining us here today. Today, we're going to have Jessie Gilchrist with us, and so she is going to from Sidekick Solutions, and she's going to be talking to us about automation. So I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping items, and then I'm going to kick it over to Jessie. So if you would drop into the chat, tell us where you're joining us from and what the weather is like where you are today. I'm actually in Aspen, Colorado today, where the weather is sunny and 72 degrees. Jessie, where are you at today?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit west of Seattle, Washington. We've been having some nice summer weather, but today it's a little overcast. So true to our roots here with a little bit of gray skies today.
You have to go back to that sometimes.
Yep.
Thanks for dropping in the chat as I see that we have people joining us from Michigan and Texas, and it's hot in Texas, not a surprise. I'm going to run through a few housekeeping items here. We do have a dial-in number should you need it. Our number is 1-669-900-6833, and I'm dropping that into the chat in case you want to reference that later as well. Also, if you would like to share ideas and continue to let us know about best practices, ways that you've used Zapier and Bloomerang together, any of those kinds of things that you can share with one another, please put those in the chat. We love to learn from our customers, and we love for our customers to learn from one another. So use that way. But if you have a burning question, please put that into the Q&A so we can make sure Jessie gets it so that she can discuss that with you and give you some answers today. Also, if you'd like a live transcript, you can click on the CC at the bottom of your screen, and that transcript will be provided for you as we go through the session today. The resources that are mentioned today will be shared with you post-session, so don't feel like you have to write everything down. We're going to send you the slides and the recording via email later today. Any questions we're not able to get to in the session live, we will follow up via email after the session today. And if at any time you need support, don't forget to reach out to our support team at support@bloomerang.com. They are always happy to help. All right, and without any further ado, Jessie, I am just going to kick this over to you to talk about automating stewardship tests. I think this is a great topic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love this one. I think this would be a great one. So a little bit about me. My name is Jessie Gilchrist. I work for Sidekick Solutions. We are a Zapier certified expert and Bloomerang integrations consultant. So we are a Bloomerang partner. We specialize in system automations for Bloomerang. We've really been a Bloomerang user, I guess, for over 10 years now, back to around 2013. So it's been a little while. And we were part of the team that launched the Bloomerang Zapier app. So lots of familiarity with Bloomerang automations and the Bloomerang platform itself. And so excited to share what we can do for stewardship automations today. I've popped my video on so I can say hi here. I'm going to go ahead and drop my video off as we're going to be doing some live demos in Zapier. And I want you to be able to see what we're building so you can replicate them yourself at your organization. Perfect. Okay, get that out of the way. So as Margie mentioned, really the focus of today's webinar is to show how you can connect Bloomerang with Zapier and how that can support your fundraising efforts by automating the creation of stewardship tasks following certain activities in Bloomerang. So in our webinar today, we are going to introduce Bloomerang and Zapier, how they work together, and why Zapier integrations are a key feature of your Bloomerang system and fundraising strategy. We are going to explore and demonstrate how you use the Bloomerang Zapier app to create follow-up tasks for stewardship activities following certain donation types, how you can assign follow-up tasks to a specific solicitor when applicable, and then we're also going to look at some Bloomerang reports that can help you monitor task completion and status across your team. And then we're going to wrap up by discussing how you can get started with Bloomerang integrations in Zapier. We will have demos, as I mentioned, throughout the webinar to show you how to set up these automations for your organization. And again, I'm happy to answer questions, so please make sure to put those in the Q&A. If you have a question, I will also keep an eye on the chat, but it's a little harder to tease out your questions in there, so make sure to put any questions in the Q&A so we can address those. It's common for organizations of all sizes to use many types of software, and we believe that automated integrations are essential to your customer database. Integrations can help connect these systems, creating a tech stack that supports your organization and its strategic goals. This is where Zapier comes in. As some of you may not be familiar with Zapier, we're going to start with a high-level overview of what Zapier is and why we believe it's a key feature of your Bloomerang system and fundraising strategy. Zapier is automation software that enables additional Bloomerang integration and fundraising opportunities. It's a middleware that sits in between Bloomerang and other apps you use, helping them talk to each other. Bloomerang Zapier app extends the power of your database by enabling integrations with over 7,000, and I think Zapier Marketplace is up to nearly 8,000, so close to 8,000 other apps in Zapier's directory. Now, Zapier was designed for anyone to build an integration. This means you don't need to be a developer or know code to set up an automated flow to sync data from one place to another. The flexibility of the Zapier platform enables custom integrations. You aren't limited to a one-size-fits-all workflow, mapping, or formatting. You can build integrations that are perfect for your organization and your workflows. Now, integrations are a key feature of your Bloomerang database and can take your fundraising efforts to the next level. Data should flow in and out of your Bloomerang database, connecting it to other best-in-class tools your organization uses. By keeping Bloomerang as a central hub of your tech stack, you'll create a global record of constituent engagement with your organization and centralize your reporting efforts. Now, again, today we're going to be focusing on what we call a Bloomerang to Bloomerang automation. So instead of data coming into Bloomerang from an outside app or going from Bloomerang to another system, we are going to be setting up stewardship automations within the Bloomerang environment itself. So before we dive into those demos, I want to do a quick poll to see how many of you are using Zapier and how many of you are using it with Bloomerang. Perfect, and we'll give a minute here for those responses to come in. I think we can go ahead and wrap up that poll there, Margie. Perfect. So it looks like about a quarter of you have never heard of Zapier. About 40% have heard of Zapier but never used it. And then we've got about a quarter of you that are using Zapier currently. So this will be great for those of you that are using Zapier. A lot of the concepts we're going to cover today are going to be familiar. For those of you that are new to Zapier, this will hopefully give you a little bit of insights into how the Zapier platform works and how you can set up automated flows with your Bloomerang system. Now, we want to start by demonstrating how you can set up a basic flow to assign a follow-up task for different levels of donations. So this is what we would call kind of the most basic or base level automation for stewardship tasks. So we're going to start by setting up two similar flows. Both of these flows trigger based on the creation of a new donation in Bloomerang, but have parameters established to assign a different follow-up task based on the amount of the gift. So we are going to have one flow that is based on transactions from $500 to $999.99, and then another flow that is based on transactions that are $1,000 or more. So we're going to add different follow-up tasks to those for a handwritten thank you to go for the $500 to $1,000 transaction, and then a personal phone call for the $1,000 or more transaction. So as you can see, these are very basic two-step workflows here. And we now are going to hop over to Zapier and we are going to walk through how we can set these up. So when I log into Zapier here, I'm going to be on my Zaps page. Zapier has a number of tools in its automation platform. We are going to be working specifically with what they call Zaps. So I'm just going to create a new Zap. And a workflow in Zapier starts with a trigger. And a trigger is a data entry event. So in this case, we want to trigger when a new transaction is created in Bloomerang. So I'm going to come into my trigger and I'm going to search for and select Bloomerang as my app. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. There we go. And then I'm going to choose my triggering event. In this case, we want to choose a new transaction. So every time a new transaction is created in Bloomerang, that would cause our trigger to run in kickoff or automation. I'm going to choose my Bloomerang account. And then when I set up my trigger, I have the ability to set a minimum and a maximum transaction amount. So in this case, as we talked about, we want to trigger this for donations that are between 500 for our first flow here, 500 and $999.99. So we are going to set our minimum amount to 500 and our maximum amount to $999.99. So this is not a greater than or less than, it is up to that amount. The other thing we're going to do is we are going to define our transaction types. So in this case, maybe I don't want to include pledges or maybe pledge payments, depending on your use case. For my use case, I'm looking specifically at one-time donations at this level. So instead of a recurring or a pledge, I'm going to choose donation as my transaction type. So this means my automation is only going to run when I have a donation that is between $500 and $999.99. You'll see there's two optional include parameters here. I could include details of my constituents' cumulative giving history or their household information. For our use case here today, we're not going to include these, so I'm going to go ahead and just leave these empty. Now that we've got our trigger, the next step is to test our trigger. So when we come to our test step here, this is where Zapier allows us to pull in 3 recent transactions that match our criteria. What that allows us to do is it allows us to set up our mapping from our transaction in Bloomerang to our follow-up task. So I'm going to go ahead and test my trigger and bring in 3 recent donations that match that amount. And then I can proceed to set up my first action. So again, in our illustration here, you can see that we only have one action. In Zapier, you are able to set up multi-step workflows, and we're going to demo one of those here later today. But for these first 2 flows, we are just looking at flows that have a single action. So for my action, I'm going to search for and select Bloomerang. And then I'm going to choose create task as my event because that is the action I want to take. I'm going to go ahead and choose my Bloomerang account, and then I can set up my action. Now, the first thing we need to do, or we can do in our action, as you've likely seen in Bloomerang when you're navigating as a user, you can link a constituent to a task. When we're talking about stewardship or follow-up tasks, we definitely want to link the constituent so that the team member who's assigned that task knows who the individual is that they are following up with. So in this constituent field, if I click in this field, I am just going to see a list of all of my constituents in my database. If I were to select one, it would assign every single task I create to that same constituent, and that's not what we want. What we want is for the task to be associated with the donor from our transaction. So when I click in constituent, I'm going to select custom. And then you can see that I have all of these fields that I can choose from associated with my new transaction. So these are all of the details of the transaction and the constituent that made that transaction. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to search for a constituent ID because this is a unique ID for that constituent. And it's a dynamic field, meaning every time my automation triggers, whatever that constituent ID is, it's going to map to this field and ensure that that correct constituent is associated with my task. Now for this use case, again, we are working on stewardship. So my channel here for my first one is going to be a handwritten thank you. So I'm going to put my channel as mail, and all of my handwritten thank yous are sent by Jeff Hagwood. So I'm going to go ahead and select him as my user. This is one of the areas here next where Zapier is really, I think, really innovative, which is instead of needing to set a specific due date of it's due on August 7th and having that assigned for every task, we can do what's called a variable date assignment, meaning if I do a plus sign and then a 3 with a lowercase d, This is telling my automation and telling Zapier that I want my due date in Bloomerang to be 3 days after the time this Zap runs and creates the task. So if it ran today, it would assign August 9th as my due date. So commonly with stewardship tasks, we may want a day or two buffer between when the transaction happens and when we want to do that more personalized follow-up. So this allows you to do that level of customization. So again, you could set this for 7 days, you could set it for 14 days, you even could put it for today or tomorrow are also variables that Zapier will accept. But we're going to do 3 days for our example today. I can define my subject. For this one, I'm going to say major donation, handwritten thank you, so that when Jeff sees this task pop up in his queue, he knows that he needs to send a handwritten thank you for a major donor. My purpose is going to be acknowledgement because this is a personalized acknowledgement we're sending out. And then in my note field, this is where we can provide a lot of different data elements related to that gift so that Jeff has all of the information that he needs to send that follow-up thank you without even having to navigate away from that task in Bloomerang. So in my note, this is where, again, I'm going to pull a lot of the details from my new transaction. So I'm going to pull in my constituent's full name. And I'm going to go ahead and pull in my amount. And I'm going to pull in my date. And I'm going to pull in my campaign name. Now, obviously, my campaign name, as you can see in here, this is from some testing we did for a different integration use case. So if that looks like an odd campaign name, it absolutely is. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say send handwritten thank you card. Oops. And I'm going to pull in the address. So street, city, state, and postal code. So you can see how easily we can pull that information in there. And if I click continue, I then would be ready to turn on my automation and have that create my task in Bloomerang. Now, as you saw in our example here, we are going to create 2 versions of this. One for the $500 to $1,000 donation range, and then another for the 1,000 plus. So the great thing about Zapier is we can duplicate our workflows. So well, not 550. So we've got our 500 to 1,000. We then can duplicate the same workflow. So instead of having to rebuild it from ground zero, we can come in here and we can make 1,000 plus version. So all we need to change here is in our trigger, we are just going to make our minimum amount $1,000, and we don't have a maximum here. Anything over $1,000 for my made up organization is going to get a personal phone call. I then am going to test my trigger. Thinking here. I think Zapier's trying to catch up with me copying my Zap so quickly here. We'll give this a second. While that's thinking, we can come back to that. I'm going to come to my action. And I'm going to change, as we talked about, instead of a handwritten thank you, we want to do a phone call here. So I'm going to change my channel to phone. I want my same due date. I'm just going to change my subject to be a major donation phone call. We're going to say the user on this one isn't Jeff. This is actually Allie. Does the phone calls for these. And then you could see I could even keep almost all of my mapping here, but I would change this bottom block to include the phone number. So it would be, let's see if it'll pull my test in. I want to be able to show you one that has the correct amount shown on it. We'll give it a refresh. I think it might have froze on us. try this again. This one seems to have frozen on us. I do have another one that's already live, so we will show you what this looks like running in real time here in just a second. But again, as I mentioned, we would come in here and just adjust this bottom piece to say, you know, call the donor at, and then again, similar to how we map the address, we can map in our primary phone number. So that's how easy it would be to copy the first stewardship flow we set up for a certain donation range for another donation range. So again, you could have many of these. You could do it for under $100, $100 to $250, $250 to $500, $500 to $1,000. So as many different tiers as you have in different types of stewardship follow-up, you can adjust for those. So let's now take a look and show you what these look like in real time. So again, I've got some automations set up on my end here that I will have run, but let's say we go into our database and I'm going to go to Stormy. And she is going to make a $750 donation here. And this is going to be to just our annual fund. Perfect. And I'm just going to go ahead and save my donation. Now, when this automation runs in Zapier, I'm going to give it a second here to run. What we will see is that that follow-up task is going to be created and assigned to our user. So then they can take that action and it will be, again, linked to this constituent. So if I refresh Stormy's timeline, we'll see right here is my task. So I did the +3 days out from today. Obviously, you can see in the one I have live, my subject is a little different than what I demoed today. Again, it's customizable for your organization. So again, we can have a due date. We can have our subject. We can see all of my data elements mapped in here. Stormy doesn't have a full address. So on that task, we don't have an actual address. Again, there's filtering that could be applied to pull in or to filter out those that don't have addresses or phone numbers if you're doing that type of a follow-up, or allowing your team to easily pivot if you need to, again, send an email or some other type of acknowledgement. But you can see all of that information pulls right in so that my user has the detail they need to be able to take action. So whether they are on the constituents page or they are viewing their tasks from their My Tasks page. So if we go to the one we just did for Stormy, either way, they will have that information to support without having to go in the timeline and find the gift that prompted that stewardship follow-up. Again, the same thing could occur for that $1,000 or more donation. And really kind of having those two flows or having some flows based off of different levels of giving can be really helpful, especially when you get into your major donor segments. Now I'm going to pause here for a quick second and look through a couple of questions that we've got. There actually is a great one here about the +3 days functionality in Zapier for the due date. Someone asked, is there a resource where we can find a full list of options here? If you actually click, it's very tiny right now, let me zoom in. This little calendar and time clock icon is actually a link. So if you see any field with that, you can click that link and Zapier will show you the different field types in Zapier. And this will allow you to see some of those examples here and we'll give you those, actually where am I at? There's a link in here, right here. So the adjust, that's not the one. No, that's a custom. I will find the resource and we will get that sent over. I need to find where Zapier put that. It used to be in this help article. Sounds like they possibly moved it. So we will go ahead and find that and make sure we get that sent over. It used to be right here, but they've moved that. So we will go ahead and find that and get that sent over as a follow-up. Yep, so there's a question here that we are actually going to cover here in a minute. The question is there a way to pull a custom field from the constituent account to determine who to assign the task to? So that is going to be our next use case, is assigning the task to a solicitor who's defined in a custom field on the constituent's profile. So we will get to that one in just a moment. Question here, once the ZAP has been completed for assigned tasks within Bloomerang, will these tasks still pop up in a reminder email as notifications for the user to follow up? So part of that comes down to the user's own notification settings. But yes, and you can also enable this setting right here if you set it to true. I did not set this because I didn't want my team members to get notifications for my test here during our webinar. But if you set this to true, the user will also get that notification email about that task being assigned. Going to go through the chat. There's a couple more here that I think we will want to cover real quick. Question was, in the trigger, can we select multiple donation types? And the answer is yes. If you wanted to base this off of a donation, a recurring donation payment, and maybe a pledge payment, so all of your revenue transactions, you could select each of those. So this type field in your trigger of which type of donation, you can select multiple options. Perfect. There's one more here I was going to ask for. Can Zapier also be used for ongoing cultivation tasks? For example, to call a major donor each quarter? Charlie, there are ways to do that. I would say at the end, there's a poll to ask if you'd like follow-up from our team. I would recommend putting yes on that poll, and we will send you a link so we can schedule a consult and talk through your use cases. There are many opportunities for stewardship and cultivation task automation in Zapier, way more than we can cover in today's webinar and more complex than we're going to cover in today's webinar. Today, we're focused on automations that anyone could deploy DIY. So just know there are many other opportunities for donor cultivation and stewardship tasks as well. There's a question here about how friendly is Zapier with automating Google Calendar invites or sending emails housed in Bloomerang. So we can't automate the send of an email out of Bloomerang. We can use other email tools to send out emails. So Gmail, Outlook, SendGrid, things like that. Even MailChimp, we can send some emails out of those. So there are ways to automate the sending of emails. Bloomerang's email editor currently is more of a scheduled email format. So it's not something we can trigger one of your Bloomerang templated emails to send out following a certain type of transaction. We'd be looking to use an outside email tool for that. Perfect. So I think those are our main questions right now. I do see someone who flagged themselves as anonymous. There is one more question that is unrelated specifically to these flows. So if you have other questions about Zapier, if we have time at the end, I may be able to go through a few of those. But if you have other questions about Zapier or other use cases outside of automating stewardship follow-up tasks, again, as Margie and I both mentioned, there will be a poll at the end to indicate that you would like to schedule a consult with our team. And we will send you a link that you can use to schedule a call with us, and we can talk through your use case and what support offerings we have that might be a fit for your organization. There's also a slew of other Bloomerang Academy webinars that are recorded and available on demand that cover Bloomerang and Zapier. Many, many use cases. So feel free to take a look at those as well, because there are some great apps and use cases and just general Zapier knowledge as well that we have covered in those over the last 3 years. And I think there's probably about 20 or 30 of those in the Bloomerang Academy on-demand library. So feel free to go take a look at those as well. So as I mentioned, the two flows we've looked at are assigning the same type of task to a single user. One of the pieces that is often, and this was a question again one of you brought up, one of the pieces that's often really helpful is a lot of organizations are tracking a primary relationship owner, solicitor, whatever you want to term that. A lot of organizations are identifying a single team member who owns that account or is the primary relationship holder for that account. And often we want these follow-up tasks to be assigned to that specific person. So in order to accomplish that, we use a lookup table. And a lookup table, let me get to my next slide here. Perfect. So a lookup table is used in the solution to dynamically code the user on that task based on the assigned solicitor. So a lookup table in Zapier is a way to convert data from your source app, which in this case is Bloomerang, to the corresponding value in your target app, also Bloomerang. But in this case, it is us translating the solicitor in a custom field on the constituent's profile to the user that's being assigned that task. The lookup key is the data that we want to search for in our table. And sometimes this is a human readable value in our lookup table. Other times it's the ID. For this use case, our lookup key is going to be that solicitor custom field. So in my database, on my profile, I have a lot of fields, but I've got a solicitor field right here identifying who the solicitor is for my donors. So I can go ahead and use that to assign the task. If Stormy makes a major donation, that task then becomes assigned to me. So it was really a helpful one. We typically, when we are doing this for stewardship automation, where we're converting a steward or a solicitor to the user on the follow-up task, we use a utility called Formatter in Zapier. It's one of Zapier's utilities that any user can use and access. It's free to use. The beautiful thing about Formatter by Zapier is that it allows you to assign a default or a fallback, meaning if there's no solicitor assigned in a custom field on an account, you can indicate which user would get that follow-up task. So it allows you to, again, have a fallback or a default so that you don't have to ensure that every single account in your database has a solicitor assigned. Ensures that for those that make large donations or donations of a certain type that do not have a solicitor assigned are still getting that follow-up task and are also then ensuring that someone on your team is following up with them. So again, as I mentioned, free app to use. We're going to be demoing this with Formatter by Zapier. So we are actually going to go ahead and we are going to look at this for that $500 to $999 automation that we had. So we're going to go ahead and use that as our example Zap. And so we are just going to add on to that. So again, right here, this is our $500 to $999. So we've got our automation. And all we are going to do is we are going to add a new action right here, or a new step between our trigger and our create task action. So I'm going to add a step and I'm going to choose Formatter by Zapier. For my event, I'm going to choose its utilities function. And then for my action, it's going to be a transform. And this is going to be the lookup table right here. So as I mentioned earlier, we talked about the lookup key being that solicitor field. So I'm just going to put my cursor in here. And again, I'm pulling from all of that data about my constituent and the donation from that new transaction trigger. And so I can pull in my constituent solicitor field. Now, in this case, the transaction I pulled in didn't have a solicitor. But you can see that this would allow us to assign a fallback value if we didn't find, or there wasn't a solicitor, or that solicitor didn't exist in our lookup table. So in this case, I'm going to put my 3 solicitors that I have. So these would be the values that I have in my solicitor field in Bloomerang. So I've got my 3 solicitors here. Now, this is one piece that gets a little more advanced, so I'm going to step through this pretty slowly here. So when it comes to dynamically mapping who the user should be from this lookup into our task, we actually need to assign the ID of that user in Bloomerang. So there are 2 ways to find this. One way is if we come in the create task and we click in this user field, the little gray number below each user's name, that is their user ID. So you could come through and jot these down and add these to your lookup table. The other option is to go into Bloomerang. So if we go to our users page and we open a user, you can see that same ID right up here in the URL. So again, you can get it from the user dropdown and the create task action, or you can get that ID from within Bloomerang as well. But we need to grab those IDs and correspond them to the solicitor. So when Jeff Hagwood is the solicitor, this is the user ID that should be assigned. And so we could go through for each of our users, for Allie, and again, I'm just copy and pasting from the URL here, and then myself. And let's say that I'm also the default or fallback person as well. So if there were no solicitor assigned, I would also be the fallback. So the fallback, again, is if that solicitor value doesn't exist in this list or is empty, the fallback ensures that someone is getting assigned to that task. So in this case, it's going to be me as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and click continue. And again, I'm going to test my step because I want what would be returned by this step. And you can see, because there wasn't a solicitor, it gave me my default, which is my own user ID. So the only change we would make to our create task action here is in the mapping of the user. So instead of selecting a single user from the dropdown, similar to how we mapped our constituent ID, I'm going to click custom. And from not the trigger, but my lookup step, I'm going to choose that output. So again, it's going to return for me dynamically the ID of that user that should be assigned. And then I would just continue and publish my Zap. So again, I have an example of this here that's running. So I'm going to go ahead to right here to one of my constituents, and I'm going to go ahead and create a donation in that $500 to $1,000 range. And you'll see the solicitor on this one is myself. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to create a donation. Again, we're going to say this one's for membership. Got a very large membership here. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure my Zap runs. Get that here. Oops. I have an ability to force my Zaps to run a little bit faster so we can see these really quickly here. Let's go ahead and run that. Perfect. And if I refresh my timeline, you can see I had my donation today. And then I've got my follow-up out here. I'd also preloaded some other tasks. I'll show you why here in a minute. But for my handwritten thank you, you can see, oops, that must be, I think I had my IDs wrong. I had my IDs wrong on my lookup on the one that I have that's running. But you would see that this would have been my user. So that is an error on my live Zap that I set up before today. That should be me. But that lookup table, again, will allow you to dynamically map that over and be able to see that running. Perfect. So again, couple different automations here. The first ones we looked at are really those basic ones by donation level. This is assuming that the same staff member on your team is performing that stewardship task for every donation of that type. The more dynamic one here is where we are looking up the ID of the user based on the solicitor so that we can dynamically assign those tasks out instead of every task being assigned to the same person. So we got a question here in the chat. What is the benefit of adding the lookup table option? The lookup table option is really a benefit if you have a solicitor field or a primary relationship owner field on your constituent profile in Bloomerang. If you don't have that, this is not needed. The only thing that this would benefit from is if you wanted those stewardship tasks to be assigned to that solicitor or that primary relationship owner instead of just being assigned out to, a single staff person who does all of your acknowledgements. Good question here in the chat. Is there any way of performing Zaps on anniversaries of donations or other activities? And the answer is yes, there are. We are not going to cover those today, but again, there are many, many opportunities for stewardship automation. So creating follow-up tasks for when a donor becomes lapsed and you want to try and recapture them. On anniversary of donations, they require some additional tooling beyond Zapier, but there are ways to accomplish those, and we have clients running those currently. Cumulative giving thresholds, lifetime giving thresholds, household giving. There are lots of different ways to set up stewardship automations beyond what we've shown here today. So I don't want to say it's a blatant yes across the board, but in most cases, the answer is yes, there are ways for us to automate the creation of those tasks. Now we're going to take a few minutes because whenever we talk about tasks in Bloomerang, I think it's important to not just talk about obviously the automation and creation of those tasks, but also what types of reports can be set up in Bloomerang to manage those tasks. So some of these are from more of a supervisor or an admin role, as well as from kind of an individual user role. And so I really like looking at the reporting side, especially if your organization doesn't use a task management tool and you are using Bloomerang for all of your task management, these reports can be really helpful. So we are going to take a look now at reporting. So there are 3 different reports that we're going to look at in Bloomerang native reports. One is an overdue task report grouped by user. Another one would be tasks due this week. This would be one that you could schedule out and deliver to your team on a weekly basis. They can see what tasks are due that week. And then as more of a supervisor or admin role, seeing what tasks were completed in the last month. If you wanted to see kind of the completion rate or what types of tasks your team has been completing, that's another great one. So again, some great Bloomerang native reports we can get as well. Now, in addition to that, I am going to demo as well a Google Sheets dashboard that we Sidekick Solutions created that can provide more summary charts and aggregates for your task usage. So instead of needing to run reports periodically or have those scheduled and send to you, again, these would be this dashboard would be most impactful if you aren't using another task management tool, but Bloomerang is your task management tool that your team is using. This is another great one. So we're going to walk through each of these now. So I'm going to hop over to my reports that I've got in Bloomerang. Overdue tasks is really the easiest one to start with. So there is a field, all of these reports, actually, let me go back a step. All of the reports I'm demoing here today are building a report from scratch and choosing just a tasks report. But for this overdue report, all I've done is just select the criteria that is overdue criteria and just making sure I'm seeing those overdue tasks. And then I have just grouped by my user, so that when I see this, I can see that Jeff has 3 overdue tasks and I have 2. The next one is tasks completed last month. Again, this is more kind of a supervisor or admin report to see the activity of your team. I had a lot of old tasks I closed out in preparation for this webinar. So you can see that the completed date is set to last month. So whenever we're looking at something on more of kind of an audit or activity basis, we always want to look at things that have a clear start and end date. So last week, last month, things like that. So in looking at last month, we can see all of the tasks that were completed. Allie had 14, Jeff had 29. So we can go ahead and see those there. And then tasks due this week. This is one that could be filtered by user or just sent out to all of your team so they can see tasks due this week. So this is where we've set due date is during this week. So again, allows this to schedule this and not have to constantly adjust the date range in this report. It's always going to reflect this week. So this is one that we would send on, first thing Monday morning, have it in everyone's inbox when they show up for the week. And then we also want to include status as active, because this is going to pull anything out that has already been completed. So status is active and due date is this week. Now, as I mentioned, we have a dashboard that we have developed. We've actually got a couple of dashboards, but this one is for task management. So again, if your team likes visuals or you want to weigh in real time to see kind of that completion status and what's upcoming or overdue, again, likely most impactful if your team uses Bloomerang as your task management tool. There are dashboarding solutions we can deploy in Google Sheets to accomplish that. So again, getting some nice charts and graphs, as well as aggregate and summary counts. And this is all driven off of just the raw task data being written over to your Google Sheet. And then those summary dashboards filter up and roll up this data for easy viewing by your team. So again, lots of options there for reporting inside of Bloomerang for tasks. as well as some more custom reporting that can be done from Google Sheets and things like that by just having that task data automate to that workbook. Now I'm going to pause right here for a couple of questions before we transition to getting started, or how you can get started with Bloomerang and Zapier, because I saw a couple good ones come through here. Christine, can you expand on your question of, are there ways to automate those tasks described on Bloomerang Academy? Can you expand on what type of tasks you're referring to? And Christine, to answer your second question, yes, solicitor, steward, primary relationship owner are all just different terminologies, whatever your team calls that custom field for who would be responsible for that follow-up or owns that account or that relationship. You could use that in your lookup table. It does not have to be labeled solicitor. It could be labeled steward, could be labeled, I've seen primary owner, I've seen primary relationship owner, really whichever terminology works for your organization. Now, the only other, yes, so Christine, thank you for clarifying. No, we do not have recordings in Bloomerang Academy on the other automations, like how to set up follow-up tasks for anniversaries or lapsed donors, cumulative giving, things like that. We don't have other Bloomerang Academy webinars that walk through DIY setups for those. They're either ones that you can go through and set those up yourself, or again, when we do the poll here at the end, if you'd like support in setting those up, indicate in that poll and our team will follow up and get a consult scheduled so we can talk through your use case and get you some thoughts on that as well. Now, getting started with Bloomerang automations is actually pretty easy. The first step in getting started is signing up for a Zapier account if you don't have one already. So all Zapier accounts begin with a 14-day free trial of what's called the professional tier functionality. Following the free trial, your plan is converted to a free plan until you choose to upgrade. Most organizations need to upgrade to a paid plan, either to build multi-step Zaps or due to the volume. So the free plan typically is not sufficient. I get that question a lot on these webinars. Expect that you will pay generally anywhere from $20 to $50 a month for automations. The more automations you add or the more apps you integrate, that cost will increase. But $20 to $50 is kind of a good general estimation for your Zapier cost as you get started. And that's, again, a per month Zapier cost. Zapier does provide a 15% discount to nonprofits. So if you do sign up for a paid plan, make sure to apply for the discount. And if you are already signed up for Zapier and didn't do that, you can do that now. So Margie's going to go ahead and submit that link to sign up as a nonprofit in the chat. Again, that is where Zapier will give you that additional 15% discount on its pricing. Now, once you sign up for Zapier, the next step is to connect your Bloomerang database. So once you sign up for Zapier, you will go to the My Apps page in Zapier and add a connection. You'll search for and select Bloomerang, and then a pop-up will open asking you to grant access using your Bloomerang login credentials. Now, this is one area where I do have a recommendation for organizations. Since the access to Zapier or the connection to Zapier for Bloomerang is based off of a single Bloomerang user, I often recommend creating a Bloomerang user that is not an actual staff member. So calling it Zapier or Zapier Automations and using an info@ or general @ email address for that user and using that to connect to Bloomerang. What that does is it future-proofs your solution, because if you connect to Zapier with a specific team member's Bloomerang user, if that individual leaves your team and you deactivate their user, your connection in Zapier will drop until you reconnect another user. So again, cannot recommend enough having a user specifically in Bloomerang that is for your Zapier connection that uses an email address that is not a specific staff member's email, but again, is a general email for that user, so that when you connect to Zapier, that connection doesn't drop when someone leaves your organization. As I mentioned, the automations we showed today, you can set up DIY. You also can reach out to our team if you would like support for setting up automations. So if you'd like support setting up automations for stewardship tasks, we do offer an integration bundle for Bloomerang customers. This includes end-to-end configuration and deployment of your automation for up to 2 stewardship flows, depends on the complexity of those. So what that means is for 2 different task types. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this service is optional. You may instead choose to deploy Bloomerang automations in Zapier DIY, and we do have customers that do that. But if you would like support, you can reach out to us and we will let you know if your use case fits this bundle or if we would need additional scope for that as well. So feel free and reach out and let us know. Now, important to note, Zapier subscription is separate from the pricing above. This is just the setup on Sidekick side. You would still have to sign up for Zapier. Once you get started with Zapier, whether you are doing DIY or reaching out to have our team support you, there's a lot of resources available. So you can search Zapier's directory of apps. You can look at some templates that are available for the Bloomerang Zapier app. And then Zapier also has a really robust help center to help you get started. I appreciate the time today, everyone. We covered a lot. We're going to launch a poll. If you would like to work with a consultant to set up an integration or explore your use case, please indicate yes, and we will send you a link to schedule a consult. So feel free to let us know, and we will follow up with you probably by the end of this week so we can get those calls scheduled. I'm going to go ahead now while that poll is open, and I'm going to transition to look through a couple more questions and see if we've got anything else here. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so there's a question here. Meg, I would say, Meg, you've got some questions about automations outside of Bloomerang stewardship tasks. So feel free to indicate yes in that poll, and we can schedule a call to talk through your letter acknowledgement use case. To answer your one question though, yes, automating emails out of Gmail is definitely doable on Zapier. We do it a lot. So automating emails, whether you are a Microsoft 365 or a G Suite organization, both Outlook and Gmail can be used to send out emails that are automated through Zapier. So again, let's say instead of a follow-up task for a handwritten thank you, you wanted to have an email go out automatically for certain types of donations. There are ways we can have those configured in Zapier. So yes, we can absolutely do automated emails in Zapier using Outlook or Gmail. You don't need a full kind of transactional email tool for that. Both Outlook and Gmail work well. Yeah, there's a question. I'm just going to address this really quick. There's a question from someone who wished to remain anonymous about if kind of anything that may be on Bloomerang's roadmap for further development of the Bloomerang Zapier app. I don't have an answer for that. I would go ahead and submit a request to Bloomerang support team, and they can answer your question on any future development they intend to make to the Bloomerang Zapier app. Perfect. I'll give a couple minutes here for any more questions. I think kind of in wrapping up here, I think a helpful piece maybe to get the imagination going a little bit more as well. We do have a number of customers that have stewardship automations running right now. This can also extend outside of Bloomerang. So Bloomerang to Bloomerang automation, we have clients running stewardship automations to create follow-up tasks for donations of certain levels, for cumulative giving this year, reaching a certain threshold, for lifetime giving, reaching a certain threshold, for donors having a certain number of donations in a year. So based off of donation count instead of donation cumulative giving total. We have organizations running automations based off of lapsed donors or donation anniversaries. And then again, these can extend beyond Bloomerang as well. So we have clients that are automating, they use an outside like video acknowledgement platform. So Grativid or what's the other one? Bonjuro. So creating tasks in those video acknowledgement platforms, following certain types of donation activity in Bloomerang. We have automations running those. We have automations sending what appear to be handwritten thank yous from a platform called Handwritten. it's handwritten, but instead of an I in written, it's a Y. So handwritten essentially mails out cards that look as though it's in handwriting. So kind of a personalized acknowledgement look and feel through the mail, but it is automated. So it's not something that your staff has to write a physical thank you card for. So we do have a customer running that very successfully for the last couple of years. So there are a lot of opportunities for automating around stewardship tasks, cultivation tasks, things like that, and supporting really the operational side of things for your team. I think it's very easy with integrations and automations to think that we are syncing data from one system to another. And there are definitely use cases for that, probably the majority of them. But my favorite, as Margie well knows, are the automations that take on the operational tasks your team are doing. And this is where stewardship or cultivation type activities can be automated and really improve your experience and free up more time for your team as well. Yeah, so Leslie, I'll go ahead and write that in the chat here. Great question. So the platform we have a client using for the handwritten notes is called Handwritten, but it's a Y instead of an I for handwritten. But again, ability to automate there, and it mails out those postcards or those cards. And there's a lot of different quote unquote handwritten fonts to choose from, and different types of personalization available for those as well.
This has been awesome, Jessie. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, so one last question here. It's a great one. Megan asked, I'd love a blog post with 10 top use cases for Bloomerang with Zapier for small orgs. There's so much we can do. Megan, you are not wrong. I would say, I think it would be hard to limit it to 10. To be truly honest, we have some great webinars in Bloomerang Academy that are called Exploring Bloomerang Automations. I also would just look through the directory of webinars we have in there, because I think it'll give you some more great ideas of different things that can be automated. There is a lot in there. But yeah, we've done a lot of Exploring Bloomerang Automations, Zapier 101, Zapier 201 that cover a lot of different use case elements and DIY elements in those as well, that I think would give you a lot more insight. I will say a lot of those webinars, the first 10-15 minutes are kind of the same Zapier overview. So as you watch through those, feel free to skip over my voice for the first 10 or 15 minutes there, and then you will get into the meat of those webinars.
That's awesome, Jessie. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here. I see people are typing in their gratitude to you, and especially, as people are saying, many people are one person shops trying to do many jobs, and Zapier is a great tool for you to be able to utilize to help you, lift some of those burdens off of you. So we're so glad you were here today.
Yeah, and I guess if it's helpful, Sidekick Solutions started in the same boat you are. We started with automations when there was 2 team members, and we had to automate as much as we could to grow our organization. And we've been able to do that because of how much we operate in terms of our back end operations. So as much as you can lean into, again, automations for your operational tasks, I think that is where a lot of organizations see the ability to expand your capabilities without having to add more human capacity. So automations to really drive your operational tasks are the ones where I think you're going to feel a lot more of that lift come off, where you're not having to, you're being prompted to take action, where it's already completing the action for you in the automation. So I absolutely love automation for that element of it. It's why Bloomerang to Bloomerang automations are some of my favorite, because they are the ones that truly take the data entry load off of your team, and it's instead prompting your team to take action, or again, completing that action for you. So lots of opportunities for your organization. I always say, when you're thinking of automations, think through the data entry tasks that you have that don't take a lot of time, but that time adds up. So the little 1 minute, 2 minute tasks here and there that you're doing repeatedly, those are a great place to start and just explore if automation is possible. Because 2 minutes times 10 times you're doing that a day, that's 20 minutes you could be focusing on your mission or your programmatic efforts. So I always love thinking of automation from that operational side first, because that's where you're really going to see more of your time freed up to focus on the elements of your work that really drive your mission forward.
That's awesome, Jesse. Thank you so much. We
Uh,
really appreciate it.
Awesome. I think we got through all the questions too, Marjorie.
I
So
So you did a great job answering
thank
these
you.
great questions today. And finally, I know we're at time. The final thing that I'm going to say, and I know Jesse would echo this too, thank you to all of you for the work that you do in your communities. We know that your communities are better places to live because of the work you do. And even if you don't hear it anywhere else today, you're going to hear it here, that we are grateful to you for the work that you do. So again, Jesse, thank you for being here today.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. Again, our door at Sidekick is always open. If you have, if you want to explore an automation use case or need support setting up your automations, please reach out and let us know. We're happy to schedule a call to talk through your use case.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And everyone, we hope to see you on the next Bloomerang Academy. Take care and have a great afternoon.